For this project, I wanted to try making a better version of something I saw at Anthropologie several years ago. Theirs was way overpriced, but I liked the idea. I started coming across used light bulbs at flea markets for really cheap, and I ended up with a little collection of bulbs. Fast forward to now, and I'm using a 2-inch thick block of walnut scraps that I glued together. I'm using a 3-inch long bit to start, and I had to hold my breath as it neared the bottom. I was cutting it so close. You can see here I'm almost maxed out. Almost. But it was all good, and then the toolpath moved on to roughing out the 3D shapes. I'm still pretty new to 3D carving with the CNC, so this was a good chance to get a little more familiar with it. And I know part of the point of having a CNC is so that it can be working while you're working on something else, but sometimes you just can't help but fall into its mesmerizing trance. Here's a shot of something I don't understand. Back to the 3D carving. If you haven't played with it yourself, you really gotta give it a try. Once you start to get the hang of it and understand how it works, you'll start to get ideas about how you can incorporate 3D carving into other projects. I know for me, after doing this project, it's already sparked some ideas for future projects. Since I was cutting so deep, I couldn't use the dust hose and I had walnut dust everywhere, but it was worth it. One thing you'll start to learn with 3D carving is the order in which the cuts need to be made. This way, you don't waste time with things like changing bits too frequently or even cutting air. I've done both. Now, with the CNC machining part of the project finished, I can pop it out and give it a look. Since I didn't quite go all the way through on the CNC, I'm going to take it over to the bandsaw, and with a 1/4-inch blade, I'm just going to cut away the outer waste pieces. Fortunately, I have 2 bandsaws and I always keep the 1/4-inch blade on this one and a 3/4-inch blade on my larger one. I'm still left with a little excess material, so I'm going to trim that off at the router table. I also ended up with a little crack in the walnut, but it's no big deal. I'll just use some CA glue to fill it and then sand it down. The finishing pass of the 3D carve was surprisingly smooth. If it weren't for that little crack, I might have just left it without even sanding, but I decided to do a little sanding anyway. A couple coats of rattle can satin lacquer, and this part is done. Next, I used some 2-part epoxy to glue in some socket adapters that I modified. I got these at Home Depot, cut them to fit, and painted them. When I put them in, I twist them around so there's good epoxy contact. Then I just pick my favorite bulbs from my collection, screw them in, and enjoy. And I hope you enjoyed this project. Thanks so much for watching.